Nicodemus here. Today's question is something that has been on my mind a lot. I've always really loved rocks, crystals, right? So I think as I've gotten older, I've bought like big citrines because like citrine is for like abundance, right? Then I have like a quartz, and quartz is really good um for programming, and it's protecting you and all these things, right? So like I feel like in my room I have all these things, but as I've started to learn, like I guess I've been putting these things on like an altar, right? So like, is it bad to have it, or like thinking it's special, And then I'm thinking like I love Jesus, so like, do I need anything more than that? Is there like a trick at the ego, or like, I don't know. So that's my question to you.
Yeah, it's a good question too. It's especially in spirituality, and for my own journey it's interesting for me because in India they have this concept that you have all these different like teachers, and they call it like the guru, the remover of darkness. And it's interesting how they paint it, and this is somewhat what I grew up around is you almost have like these teachers, but then you have like the teacher of your teachers, the one that like in their mind guides your path. And it's funny when I found the course, it really, I'd already been reading a lot of like the gurus for many years, probably like well over a decade of my life. Like I'm talking hardcore. I mean, I was in my 20s. I would be partying out, hanging out. And the next day I'd be hungover, but like reading these books. It was very ironic, or very, at that time I was very split. Uh, and in that, what like it was very difficult for me to bring it into my experience. I mean, I would have these revelations and insights and all this stuff, but I was also a kid at the time. And then when I discovered the course, even then though, there were a lot of parallels for me. But in the end, I would almost say like Jesus is my Satguru. That's how. And it actually in India, there's pictures of Christ, like Jesus, everywhere. I mean, he's considered like a very enlightened being. So it's not like that's not. I found it very interesting. And people like Krishna Das. Everybody loves Krishna Das's music. He's from Brooklyn. Ram Dass from the Northeast up in Massachusetts, rich family. They went to India to learn about like this mysticism, and yet like their guru's talking about Jesus. And they're like, what the? Like, we were trying to get away from that. And here you are. And like some of them talk about like you should meditate the way Christ meditated. He lost himself in love. So the course addresses a lot of this stuff. And I used to be into crystals and all that. Here's the thing. It always comes down to what is it for? Like if you have a picture of Ganesh, and Ganesh reminds you of the removing of obstacles, the thing is there's no magic in the Ganesh itself. There's no magic in the crystal itself. And that's where it becomes magic, actually, the course would call it. So magic is this idea that there's this like power outside of you that could have a force against you or for you, like outside of God. That's magic. The course actually goes with the uncreative use of the mind, because in creation is this process of the creator. And I'm going to use the best that I can descriptions. We just need to understand that in all of these talks, words fall short. I mean, words are symbols of thoughts, and thoughts are symbols of the thing itself. So when we're talking about it, it's already twice removed. And so we're doing our best to describe something. There is this continuous process of extension from God. Extended outward is you as the I am, or the Christ. And that extension continues outward with our creations. And those creations are eternal. So I'm just sharing this on a high level, or starting at maybe the top level, is that I have a theory that we're together forever. That even as beings, it's almost like the rays of the sun. we are connected on realms and dimensions beyond what we can understand in our mind as humans. And it's not even up for us to understand it in this game, really. That's why it's a course in miracles. It's not a course in revelation or a course in knowledge. Because if it was a course in not, what the course says is knowledge is beyond perception in this game. And you and I can only understand dualistic perceptions with our mind. So this idea that this stone has a power in itself outside of me is magic. What you start to realize is that what the ego teaches us to do is to make idols of things in the world as though they have power, because the ego's continually attempting to convince us that we're little and impotent. That's because that's how it survives and really has its existence. Its existence is based on a separation from God. So the ego voice is literally a call to death, destruction, littleness. That's what fear is. So when you think about this idea, now here's the thing. What is it for? So you can have, like, I have a stone from the mountain in India, like, does it have any power in itself? No. Because here's what you start to understand. Now, if you study, let's say, universal law is mysticism, from thousands of years ago, universal law, and these mystics and the three mystics, whatever, this book, I did a course on it, read it, and I just understood the laws, of universal law. The law of mentalism is one of them. Is everything that you see is mind. It's all mind. The way they say it in India, it's all consciousness, right? But everything is connected. So what Jesus says in the course, he says that it's never, like, when you talk about the altar, he's like, it's not the church, the structure of the church that makes the church holy. It's the altar within it. So it's not about our body or the physical world or form. It's the altar within our mind. So if you think of your mind like an altar, the Ganesh on the altar in your room, it pales in comparison to the Ganesh on the altar in your mind. And the Ganesh on the altar in your mind is really the Holy Spirit. So that's the only remover of obstacles. Now, the Holy Spirit takes all these different forms because it's all one. It's all a Leela. And a lot of religion doesn't understand this because their religion, the ego in some ways hijacked a lot of religion. And he says things in the course like many sincere Christians have misunderstood some of this stuff because their own, he even says this about the apostles, it was like their own unconscious guilt. Like they couldn't deal with, like, their brother and their teacher was taken from them. So that guilt they projected out into the world, and then God became a vengeful God. God became a wrathful God. And that's only because that, and even Jesus says in the course, he says, a lot of what I told you, he said, I said you wouldn't be able to understand until later. And this is a theory. I don't know. I can't prove any of this stuff. Is like, are we ready to hear now? That's why we're having conversations like this, because we're in a very different level of consciousness than we were, let's say, thousands of years ago. And still there's similarities. But now when you think about these idols and the things you're talking about, nothing outside of you can add to you. Nothing outside of you can take away from you. Nothing outside of you can protect you. The only place you can go for protection is within you. And it's within you because God placed it there. That's what he says in the course. The Holy Spirit is in your mind. And because the Holy Spirit is so dim in our minds, we need to extend it to really see it and understand it. Like, the Holy Spirit's voice is so dim and the world of form is so loud, so that everybody tries to find their wholeness and their happiness in all of this changing of form. And, like, maybe this rock will give it to me. No, that didn't work. Let me get this one. I gotta do that. Let me read. I gotta try this. Oh, I gotta do that. I gotta visualize better. I gotta all this stuff, and it always sets you up. Here's the thing. It doesn't clean the altar. The only way is to clean the altar in your own mind. And the only path ultimately to do that is through forgiveness, because what you're doing in forgiveness is you're looking at all of the figures in the dream and you're ascribing to them all the same meaning. And it's only the meaning of love. It's only the meaning of like charity or the handing the chalice we talked about. Like it's only the extension of love, because in the extension of love, that's where the true power and the strength is, because that's what actually protects us. That's what the Holy Spirit teaches us, is that the atonement is the only device. The atonement, think of the atonement, at-one-ment, or the healing of our minds, the correction of errors. In religion, they said atonement, like you atone for sins, but sin is a lack of love. So the atonement is the correction of lack of love, right? The atonement is the only tool that doesn't like hurt us because it's the only one that can protect us. You can use anything in the world, even stones and all this. You can use it for witchcraft and demon worshiping, people do, and sacrifice and all of that. And if you think of what in the Bible, what Jesus was talking about was he came to reinterpret the law, right? And the law, and he was like, there's only one God and I am the Christ. But what he also, people are missing this, is he was saying, you're going to do all of this as well. He wasn't saying like, make me special and now make an idol out of me, which, notice, the mind always goes to make idols, because all of this, the Course would call idolatry, is this idea that this thing is holy outside of you and I as the creation of the living of God. The extension of God is the only thing that is holy, because what but you did the Creator create, and what but you is the kingdom.